Larry, is just all about Republicans or something beyond Republicans? Maybe Israel, maybe something. Because Donald Trump, yeah, they had something against Donald Trump himself. They would have put it out long before,
You
he's
think?
been elected as the president of the United States.
I don't know. I don't know. This is blackmail has a funny way, especially when it's backed by so much money. And this was backed by probably close to $1 trillion all told, when you add up all the different billionaires involved with this. When you have that much money, let's say it's just $500 billion, man, you can bribe a lot of people. You can blackmail a lot of people. And when it's so encompassing of famous names, you can make it doubly dangerous to defy it because you'll wind up dead. I was watching Tucker Carlson, an old interview. In the interview, Tucker says, "Well, you don't want to pick Marco Rubio to be your vice president." He's recommending this to Donald Trump. Why? Well, you want to pick J.D. Vance. Why? Well, you don't want to pick Marco Rubio because then they'll assassinate you. Check that out. Then they'll assassinate you because they want that neoconservative son of a bitch to be the president of the United States. And that's the only way he'll get there. Tucker's right. I mean, the words came from his lips in the video. So I have to assume that was a good representation of what his advice to Trump was. Don't pick Rubio. Pick Vance, because if you pick Rubio, they'll assassinate you.
Actually, I don't know if you see what's going on X, because the Zionists are somehow putting out that Rubio together with Ted Cruz are the candidates in 2028. They don't want JD Vance to
I
be.
don't doubt it a bit. Don't doubt it a bit. And I watched a guy yesterday, I think it was. I just stumbled on it. He's a young preacher, and he was explaining, and I happen to, truth in advertising here. When I was a senior in high school, I had this moment that I played with possibly going to a seminary. I had this moment that I might want to be a Christian prelate, a Christian pastor, or whatever. I got over it, but I had this moment. So I made this intensive study of everything that I thought I'd need to know and learn about and all that. All to say, I watched this guy who was at that kind of stage in his life that I was then, only he was a little beyond it. He'd actually made the decision. And he'd made a lot of study, and I was impressed with his grasp of both the Old and the New Testament in the Christian religion. And here's what he said in essence, and he's right. The New Testament was a complete repudiation of the Old Testament. A complete repudiation. Christ was a repudiation of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, and all those things that Ted Cruz says he believes in and makes his national security decisions based on. Israel, Israel, Israel. And this guy was right. Christ came to earth in the image of Christianity that we all should see, and if we're going to believe in it, believe in, to repudiate that Old Testament and that old God. The new God was a forgiving God whom Christ represented. I've always had a problem with this because it's not monotheism, really. There are three people. There's the Holy Spirit, there's Jesus Christ, and then there's God. You hear it. If you're a Catholic like my wife was, you hear it every time the priest walks across the aisle, So how in the world can you have Ted Cruz and these people like John Hagee and all these others who base their Christianity, mind you, Christianity, they don't discard that term on the Old Testament. How can you do that? Well, you do it the same way Trump runs his administration. You lie all the time. You cheat all the time. You don't know what you're talking about. You're ignorant. You're stupid. All those things pertain at one time or another, probably, but it's a complete repudiation of everything Jesus stands for, to go back to the Old Testament and cite from it and quote from it and say that that is what Christianity is all about. Christ was not even born.
Larry, we had Donald Trump praising the UN Security Council for adopting his resolution to establish a so-called international force in Gaza.
Read Julian Barnes in The Guardian this morning.
It seems that they're going to put 20,000 troops by January 2026 in Gaza. And these troops are coming from Egypt, if I'm not mistaken, in Turkey,
Indonesia.
Indonesia, yeah. And what is your take on the resolution at the UN? And how do you understand the behavior of China and Russia?
I don't have great difficulty isolating my opinion on China and Russia. My first inclination was to say veto, veto. But then I thought about it. You know, I just took my passions and put them aside, and I said, why? China primarily, but Russia too now. Why veto something that is going to prove the undoing of your principal adversary in the world? Why not just abstain, let it pass, and watch the disaster unfold? And I'm quite confident that Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin felt that way about it. So they weren't going to veto it. Julian Barnes, as I was mentioning, in The Guardian, has a piece this morning, and he's kind. He's kind. He says, what a bizarre deal. What a bizarre deal. And he goes through it. He doesn't really rip it apart. He just tries to explicate it, tries to tell what it's all about, the people who will provide the peacekeepers, what Abu Mazen will do, what Hamas will do, what Tony Blair will do, what Donald Trump will do, all those things. If you look at what they put together, as opposed to what the UN General Assembly was putting together, which this now obviates, the UN General Assembly deal would have been a good deal, because it would have not brought the usual characters to the front. At the same time, I say that this is going to be a corrupt deal from the start, and it's going to be colonial masters, working over a situation that they want to fix for Israel's sake, really, as I said before, for their own sake, but Israel is a tool. It's just going to be a slower elimination of the Palestinians, and it'll look more palatable to the world. And Tony Blair will orchestrate it. That's really what it is. Let's look at the foibles, though. What might happen as they move forward? Ben-Gvir said in his remarks that as long as there was a codicil, a line, a part of the agreement that said something about a future Palestinian state, it was total anathema. Now, how do you continue a regime in Israel with the need for people like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and a host of others? I looked at the polls again, Nima. It has not changed very much at all. Fully 80% of Jewish Israelis still agree with Netanyahu's progress and plan. A higher percentage of that agree with the general scope of what he objects to with regard to Palestinian state. Something like a few percentage points below that, clearly a majority of Israeli Jews believe that all the killing is justified and should continue and even deepen and become more intensive. So how are you going to take that body politic and put any leadership in there that will be complacent at a minimum and supportive at a maximum of this deal? You aren't. You aren't. So you're going to have the major fly in the ointment is going to be your principal antagonist at the moment. It's going to be Israel. It's like taking Ukraine, for example. I'm sure you want to talk about that. We'll get to that, I'm sure. But it's like taking Ukraine and saying, oh, we can have a peace as long as we have 200,000 Nazis. How in the hell can you have a peace with 200,000 Nazis? It's impossible, utterly impossible. So I don't know how you deal with either one, but I do know that what Gaza is going to present is more of the same at a slower pace, and probably Netanyahu's exit from the scene and someone else coming in to give it a patina of Israel's compliance. But it's not going to be anything for the Palestinians. And then the question becomes, because bin Salman and others, I'm sure, of his ilk in the Arab world have said, if there's not a road to a Palestinian state, you do not have our signature on the deal. Well, they can obfuscate that. They've done it for a long time, as long as someone's telling them, like Donald Trump, that there will be a Palestinian state. But their people will see that there isn't going to be a Palestinian state. You want a second Arab Spring? You want a second opposite type intifada? I mean, that's what we're looking for. These leaders, in many respects, especially Sisi, and I would say to a certain degree, the leader in Jordan and certainly the leader in Lebanon, are holding on by the skin of their teeth in some respects. You can't satisfy the bulk of the people in the Arab world if your promise of an Arab state, Palestinian state, Arab state, Palestinian state, is something they see as being foolishly impossible. So how are you going to deal with that? And then the ultimate question, how are you going to deal with, it's still coming, Nima. How are you going to deal with Netanyahu when he goes back to war with Iran? It's still coming. Yeah, I haven't changed my mind. It's still coming. And I think we are complicit in that too, which is what troubles me most of all about this business of him making these bellicose remarks about Nigeria, positioning forces off Venezuela. The real threat that we have in the world, which we are making more intense every day, China. The threat we have, which we're making more intensive every day, from Russia. And we're doing all this at the time we're promising Netanyahu we're going to pick up the pieces after he gets stomped by Iran. And I think Trump is serious about that. I think he's serious about coming in on Netanyahu's side. So, all to say, this deal doesn't have a prayer in hell of being positive for the Palestinians. This deal does not have a prayer in hell of being positive for the Palestinians, period.